I will call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole for the Urbana City Council to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Wu?
Here.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Ms. Hersey?
Here.
Ms. Colasetti?
Here.
Ms. Bishop? Ms. Wilkin?
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Here.
Mayor Marlin?
All right, thank you. I don't believe we have any minutes to review tonight, is that correct? So are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to presentations and public input. Our first presentation tonight will be the Imagine Urbana Transportation chapter.
All right, good evening, Council. So I'm John Zeman, the City Engineer, joined by Lily Wilcock and Andrea Rudy. I'm here to talk about the transportation chapter of Examine Urbana, which, of course, is talking about the existing conditions that will feed into our comprehensive plan that we're working on. It's a great chapter. There's a lot of great content that Andrea and Lily have been working on. I'm just going to touch on a few highlights. So as we scroll into it, kind of a good way to start with thinking about transportation is, City of Urbana, we're responsible for part of a regional transportation network. And the primary purpose of it is to get people and goods moving in, around, and through the region. An interesting starting point is looking at the results of a census survey, Census 2020, asking Urbana households how do they get to work. As you can see, about 80% of the respondents use some type of motor vehicle, whether it was a private car or public transit. And then you have about 15% using pedestrian transportation of some sort, whether it's walking or rolling to get to work, and 6% using cycling as their primary mode for commuting. Of course, a couple of notes here. I mean, commuting is not the only way we use transportation. We use it for all sorts of reasons, for fun, for going shopping, doing the errands, things like that. I'd also note that this is only for Urbana households, so not counting the people who commute to Urbana from outside of Urbana to do work. It would lead me to guess, just speculate, that probably the percentage of motor vehicle use is probably higher than what this shows. But it's an important thing, and the numbers don't indicate how important the say the vulnerable road users are to our network. Vulnerable road users being, of course, pedestrians and cyclists. But these are the people who are using our streets, our sidewalks, and our multi-use paths. So like I said, we're part of a network. Nothing new to you on council, but just to highlight that we are part of a metropolitan planning organization known as the Champaign-Urbana Urbanized Area Transportation Study, or CUOTS, which is administered by the Regional Planning Commission. And our partners in that CUOTS group is, of course, the City of Champaign, the City of Savoy, the Village of Mahomet, the University of Illinois, and Mass Transit District, and IDOT. And we come together for items such as planning, studies, funding, and things of that nature, and for applying for grants. And so it's how we fit into this network is also part of what transportation means for Urbana. And how we think about transportation, how we think about planning for transportation is guided by a handful of pretty key documents that look at different timelines for the city and for transportation. Starting at the narrowest focus, we have the capital improvement plan, which of course we're working on now and will be coming to you in early May to talk about more. We just look at a 5-year time horizon, looking at our fund balances and what projects we have that are upcoming, maintenance programs, operations programs. and it's really implementing what the big idea is. Then we, you know, and of course for transportation, I'll say our primary funding for it, as we can see, the transportation is really this pavement maintenance and repair, a lot of light signals and signs, sidewalk path construction maintenance, kind of broken out by the magnitude of the spending we have had in recent CIPs. Primary funds come from the general fund, through the capital replacement and improvement fund, through motor fuel tax, which could either be from the state based on our census population, or the local motor fuel tax, and grants when we can get them. So a lot of outside funding that goes into these projects, but as we zoom out away from that 5-year perspective, the comprehensive plan comes in as a 20-year time horizon where we look out into the future and we think about how do we want Urbana to grow, the transportation network to grow, what do we want to make out of the next 20 years with our network. And very much related to that, CUOTS creates a long-range transportation plan document, which has a 25-year time horizon. And in fact, the comprehensive plan that we create will feed into that long-range transportation plan, which is what CUOTS expects its member agencies to have official plans that then can become part of this regional plan, which helps us, you know, if the more we plan in advance for whether it's growth of transportation network or improvement of the existing network, makes it easier to get funding in some cases, really, and just to be smart about what we're doing as a region, so we're coordinated. And then lastly, we have kind of the longest range view are the asset management plans that I know you've heard Tim talk about quite a bit. We have been working on those to understand really this, how do we keep Urbana transportation going in perpetuity? What does it mean that we have transportation assets in Urbana generations from now? And so that really gets down to understanding what are assets that we have, what are the condition they're in today, and what is the level of service that we want to maintain for those assets? What do we find acceptable? When we understand that input, it can tell us how much funding and what kind of programs would we need to maintain that level of service. And so it becomes very important for, you know, even the 20-year outlook, where I think, you know, one thing that we'd like to keep on the top of people's minds is that we think about what does it mean for growth for Urbana and the transportation network. We want to be cautious about adding more infrastructure to our, you know, our current assets. When we do, it'd be, you know, really important for the city to try to find additional assets that will provide a return on investment for us, that we can get a revenue that is generated from this asset, not just adding liability to our city. So those are some of the big highlights, and I think we'd be happy to take any questions that council has.
All right, Chris?
Could you go back to your first slide that you showed, John?
Letting it load here. We're talking about the modes of transportation?
Well, the pie chart.
Yeah. Let's see if I can get it to load.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe refresh it. Oh, here we
Okay,
go.
I don't understand the pie chart. Okay, and the statistic that 50% of households own 2 cars. So, I mean, the big pie chart seems to indicate that Urbana uses, you know, alternative forms of transportation besides a car. Is that right? I mean, Lily, go ahead.
So there's a couple things going on that are unrelated to each other in this pie chart.
Yes.
And I just want to point out, too, that it does say Census 2020. It's actually the 2019 5-year estimate, so I will be changing that tonight. But what's going on is, for the most part, when people are coming to work and when they report as an Urbana resident, there is a survey out there, the American Community Survey, will come to certain Urbana residents and will say, hey, yeah, how do you get to work? And that's what that question is representing. And it is a very limited snapshot of one little piece of people's lives in Urbana. So keep that in mind. What we usually like to look at, though, with that perspective is like, oh, a lot of people take alternative forms of transportation, but it's actually just we're kind of inferring that because we can't compensate for all sorts of other things that, how people get to work in Urbana would include a much bigger number than just people who live in Urbana.
So
Yeah.
maybe the pie chart should say out of this many answered surveys or something, maybe, to kind of
Yeah, it could do that.
clarify it a little bit.
Right.
Because it just seems to me there's more car driving than that pie chart seems to indicate. And one other question, John. When you say creating infrastructure and transportation that doesn't create a liability for us but gains revenue, what do you, like, could you give me maybe an example of what you mean? Like, when we build a road, we're building a neighborhood that expands our tax base. Is that what you mean, or?
Yeah, and again, Lily's the smarter person to talk about this.
No, but there's a really fun part of actually a different chapter that really addresses this development, growth of transportation, and the ability to actually maintain that, and the very precarious situation Urbana has been in the last 50 years trend, and what that kind of means for the next 20. And that's at the end of the development and taxes chapter. So we're not going to skip ahead to that, but it goes through a lot of detail, and I think like maybe the one phrase, and I think you'll hear a lot more about it in May from John Zeman, who's smarter, is that it's really difficult to take on more and more costs when you can't afford the current costs that you're operating at right now. Like that is a difficult situation, and it needs to be rectified in some way, which means change.
Mary Alice.
So I guess my question here is, you've got how do people get to work, which of course we know that we have delivery services, we have to get goods to different places and so forth, which are large and heavy trucks, which are very hard on our streets and so forth. But I did think it was very interesting, if you go to the other slide that you were talking about funding, a large portion of the money that we spend is in pavement, maintenance, and repair. And from what I heard you say, that does not include sidewalks and multi-use paths. Is that correct?
Well, we break it out in this graphic. There's a thin line, kind of where my cursor is above it. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly my point, right? So we've got all this money that we're putting into pavement maintenance and repair, and then we have a very slim little line that we're putting into sidewalks and multi-use paths. Not only that, but we're also relying a lot on grant funds, it looks like, to get those sidewalks and multi-use paths. Is that correct?
Currently, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Can I just say that is part of it, and this is a representation of like what you have, and so that there's a lot of things that don't get covered in that.
All right, I think I saw Sharice next.
Okay, so when we're talking about transportation and the cost of the infrastructure and so on and so forth, does this, and we haven't gotten to this yet, but does this also fall into the idea that the city needs to be more densely populated in areas to help keep the city from having a sprawling type of population, here, there, spots there, where we would that actually contributes to having to fund the infrastructure for pavement, maintenance, and repair, so on and so forth? Is there a connection?
Yeah, for sure there is. And I think that there's, in a basic illustration, I know an analysis that Lily's been working on, we've been just feeding her some data for, is kind of a value per acre analysis of which then relates to what's the cost of the infrastructure for like that same parcel of land, for example. And so if you think about it, if you can minimize the infrastructure while maximizing the tax revenue from that parcel, I mean, an example could be, a multi-story apartment building. You get much more tax revenue for like the same block than you do if you have like, a few single-family homes on that block. Just as an example.
think to address Chris's question as well as Sharice's, when we're looking at development in Urbana, new development, we're really concentrating on the areas that have that infrastructure already in place so that we aren't incurring additional costs. So that's a big part of it too. And as Lily said, that'll be covered more in the development and taxes chapter.
Okay, Grace.
Thanks so much for the update and sharing the website. I hope people can have a chance to check it out. Before my main question, can we also just loop back to Mary Alice's had me thinking, and is it also a correct assessment to say that sidewalks are about 10% of like the monetary value of the roads, right? Like there's something in there to replace all the roads would be 450 million, to replace all the sidewalks would be 50 million. So, I mean, it seems like proportionally, even if we maintained roads and sidewalks the same proportion, it would still be about 10% of the overall cost. Is that a
I
way
don't
of
remember.
thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, you're along those lines. Like, and if you look at the overall, like all the pavement, the sewers, sidewalk lights, signals we have, pavements like accounts for over 40% of that value of assets that we have, and the sidewalks, it's maybe 10%. It's something around that range. It's quite a bit less.
Just makes sense. Just clarifying, because it makes sense. We wouldn't spend like the same amount on sidewalks and roads because they're just proportionally not the same amount of concrete and space and money, right?
Sure. Yes.
And then just my question here was about the future considerations. I see you guys have lots of great questions there. And so are you still taking public input? And then is the next step, is this what John was saying? It kind of goes into the comp plan and public works planning is the next phase?
Yeah, so actually, I'm so glad you brought that up because this is the background information for the comprehensive plan, but also for public input in the next part of public input. So early in the summer, Andrea and I have another exercise for the public that we'll have online, and it will bring up a lot of. It's designed to put you in the decision maker role for a lot of these kinds of issues for everybody who participates and wants to provide their feedback. But it also, it should, I think, for a lot of people, bring up a lot more questions and wanting to know more about these issues before you make a decision on it. And there's some really tough trade-offs as well that are presented to you to kind of mimic a little bit of what's realistic feedback and what we can really make sure that we're addressing like the practical ability of the city in a comprehensive plan. And so in order to really give you those options and really understand a little bit more about how the city works, what those issues are, we try to use trends and issues instead of being a minor part of it, really trying to focus around what those questions we got, a lot of which we got those questions in 2021 in public input. But we've also noticed that these are kind of like common reoccurring things that people need to understand in order to feel comfortable providing input and understand how things were working.
Great. Thank you so much. So you said this is the background info, and then in the early summer, you'll have another round of public input. Great, thank you.
Yeah, and when we talked about the tool we're using as an online tool, but we are going to have some in-person meetings as well. We're trying to reach the people that normally wouldn't get involved or wouldn't be using the website, so we'll have some in-person sessions in addition.
All right, thank you. If you go back to planning for just 1 second, I want to say thank you for using Sankey diagrams because I think they really help people understand where things come from and where they go to. It's a flow of money, right? And I was, like Grace, I was going to mention that if you took the volume of pavement, both square footage and thickness, and compared it to sidewalks, I would imagine that the ratio would look something like this, if not close to it. So it's not a surprise to me. And it looks to me also that we are spending more motor fuel tax on sidewalks than we are grants, but we are spending a lot of money from grants to fund sidewalks and not as much from the general fund. So something worth pointing out. All right. I think that's all the comments and questions. Thank you. I gotta say, this collection of information is fantastic. I only hope people spend time with it. It's like pulling out the Encyclopedia Britannica on Urbana, and you can drill down on it just about anywhere you want to. And I just hope people do that before we take more public input so that we're all coming from the same collection of information. So thank you.
Really appreciate that, and spread the word about the website, getting people involved. Smile Politely did a great article last week. I don't know if you saw it, that they really teased people, I think, into hopefully reading more about it. And, that's what we hope as well, is that they can do that. Next week, we will be covering development and taxes, and Carol Mitten's going to do that presentation, so.
All right, thank you. Next up, we're going to have a presentation with our guest from our sister city of Zomba, Malawi. I ask former council member Dennis Roberts to lead this.
Yeah, is this on? Okay, it's on. We're glad to be back to say hello to the city council members and, of course, the mayor, if she had been here too. We have guests this week coming in from our sister city in Africa, that's Zomba, Malawi, and they're here to do a special project. They've been involved in a tax assessment project in the city of Zomba, in which they're evaluating with the assistance of the Department of Political Science at the U of I to make an assessment of the value and the public response to added value to the community through the collection of trash, rather than having it accumulate on the sidewalks or in the along the countryside, to collect it and to dispose of it in a different kind of manner, and then to pay it a small tax related to that. So I have here with me the Director of Public Works and Social Services from the city of Malawi, Busta Chinoa, and he's going to say hello, and then we're going to have a little bit slideshow.
Thank you and welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Busta Chinoa. Just to correct him, I'm the Director of Health and Social Services, not Public Works. I am really delighted to be here, finally at the Urbana Council, also on a year when we are celebrating 15 years of anniversary of relationship between Zomba and Urbana. That's why the title of my presentation is Celebrating 15 Years of Zomba Urbana Sister City Relationship. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I haven't seen your slideshow yet, so why don't you talk through it, okay? You made it up, so would you present it, please?
Please make sure the microphone's on.
Thank you. Busta and I put this together, more or less together. So just a reminder of where we are. We're in southeastern Africa and located near a beautiful area along the Zomba Plateau is the city of Zomba, which was the former capital of northern Rhodesia in the colonial era. Do you want to? While we're here, Busta, go ahead. Old colonial buildings, very much, the British were here, so you're driving on the wrong side of the road. Traditional courthouses. Zomba's been a city since 2008, about 100,000 people. That number's gone up significantly with people moving to the peri-urban areas of Zomba. You can see Zomba City labeled there in the flag. This is Malawi. Probably the largest natural resource of the country is Lake Malawi. At least that's what the Malawans call it, not necessarily the Mozambicans, the big blue area there. Think wet, almost tropical Africa, not dry Saharan type Africa. The links to the Zomba area really go back to the Urbana Presbyterian Church and the shallow well team that Don Mason ran for many years. And you can see the News Gazette article there from 2007. That effort had been going on for several years then. This is when Dennis went on one of those trips. He donated books then, and Dixon Vuapiri, who's noted here on this slide, actually was not a Fulbright, maybe something like an Emerson Fellow here at the University of Illinois in the library school. And so this essentially fueled Dennis's desire to establish the sister city relationship, and you can see the date, the 25th of February in '08. Mayor Pressing signed a memorandum of agreement between our city council and theirs. And similar to most sister city relationships, what we're trying to do is to work together in a citizen-to-citizen sort of capacity. Inevitably, city officials are involved, but it's really about trying to get people to interact with people for everybody's betterment. So we're working with an animated outreach program that actually started here at the University of Illinois called SAWBO, Scientific Animation Without Borders. And there is some work being done in theater development, and actually recently, it's been a couple of years since we talked about some work with the geology department here at the University of Illinois. And the GINA CCAP, this is the Urbana Presbyterian effort to build a school in a small town nearby called Domasi. And we've been, we as in you all and the citizens of Urbana have been working to have school partnerships over there. And then the Metakita sanitation project that Dennis mentioned, going to go through these real quickly. We started with the African Urban Poverty Alleviation Program project. Dennis wrote the grant. I managed that one. Built things there. That's me in the center. And Dennis a couple of places back. And Boost is probably in there somewhere. For this one, I wrote the grant, and Chris Storr, who's currently a county rep, managed this program. Both of these were Gates-funded programs, pass-through funding. And just a little bit of a review of what those are. Basically, these were all public welfare and sanitation projects. This is a bunker, how we deal with the refuge that people make. This effort, the Sino-African initiative was meant to try to separate organics from inorganics so that you could have a value-added product that might replace inorganic and expensive fertilizers for people's fields. A lot of local maize production all over Malawi as well as the rest of Africa. On to the Metakita project here. Dr. Matt Winters is with us, and everybody else that's on that second line actually has doctors in front of their names now. And this is all about seeing whether or not people will pay taxes to get services, and that's something, of course, that you guys deal with all the time. And so we're just trying to review the history and think about the future in terms of the Zomba and Urbana relationship and where our areas of partnership are. And this is a statement from Busta. So, okay, and that's the end.
Thank you.
So let me just say that we invite the public and the city council members, if they wish, to come to the Urbana City Library at 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon from 4 to 5:30. We're going to have a meet and greet. We're going to have a little bit of food. We're going to have Busta here to talk to you about Africa. We're going to have a slideshow. And we're expecting to have a musician come from Peoria whose specialty is African music and instrumentation. He apparently is really interested in meeting our friends from Africa. And tomorrow, because of a delay and a problem that occurred at the airport, our second visitor, Mr. Musa Mawali, who's a great friend of ours as well, we've known him from the very first day we walked into the Zomba. He's going to be coming here to participate in this grant project at the Political Science Department. And so he's arriving tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning at O'Hare, and I'm going to drive up to get him. So he'll be here too. So anyway, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you come and visit us at the library on Wednesday. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
And Busta has actually brought a gift for the mayor, but since she's not here, we'll be connecting with her later.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have any questions, council? All right, seeing none. Thank you again.
Okay, we're easy.
All right, next up would be public input. If anyone would like to address the Urbana City Council, please approach the microphone and state your name. You'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Hello, my name is Esther Pat, and I'm the director of the Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union. And I'm here tonight because you're going to be considering how to spend funds in approval of your annual action plan, how to spend the home funds for housing, as well as distribution of the ARPA funds. The good news about tonight's proposals is that they address some of the most vital human needs in our community. The bad news is there is nowhere near enough money, which I know you all know, and it is very sad that even with all this extra money, there still is not enough money to ensure that every person in Urbana has a place to live. For that reason, it's especially important to maximize the impact of the funds that you do get. Tenant Union has never made recommendations to City Council about how to spend the money because there are so many needs, but we are among many organizations that encourage you to put as much as you can into housing for extremely low-income people because those are the people who need it the most. But also, there are things you can do that don't particularly cost money, and one of them is an issue I've been talking to you about every week, and I'm going to mention again tonight, and that is the new state law and the whole campaign to promote awareness of the requirement that all people be treated equally when they rent housing, and that includes people who are using housing choice vouchers from the Housing Authority or any other kind of voucher. At last week's City Council meeting, Mayor Marlin made a very nice statement in support of the new law, and then the city attorney and the city administrator said they still have questions about the law. To address their questions, a group of lawyers in Chicago who've been working on this issue for many years because Chicago has protected voucher holders' fair housing rights, wrote a letter, kind of a long letter, with 48 endnotes that I submitted to all of you through public comment. Although I thought the staff see it, and maybe not, but City Council Member Evans said he was going to forward it to whatever staff, but if they don't go look at it themselves. This letter was written by, or submitted to by, the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, Hope Fair Housing, Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union, Open Communities in Chicago, the Chicago Fair Housing Alliance, Housing Choice Partners, the director of the Fair Housing Clinic at the University of Illinois Chicago Law School, and Housing Action Illinois, the last being a 35-year-old coalition of dozens of housing organizations in the state of Illinois. Finally, I hope, even if you don't read the whole thing, if you would just even look at the 48 endnotes and see how many different sources there are, and I hope you realize a lot of work was put into this in order to help educate us downstate about that which so many lawyers in Chicago have taken for granted up there for years. But finally, I just want to remind you, or inform you if you don't know, the Section 8 program was first created in 1974. That was 49 years ago. And Housing Authority of Champaign County first started receiving funds in 1975. Urbana is not sailing in uncharted waters. There has been close to half a century of cities like Urbana and counties and states adopting fair housing law to make the Section 8 and Housing Choice voucher programs work. There's also been a lot of litigation. And I do believe the ultimate motivation to the state legislature to pass this law, which folks like me have been working on since the 1980s, and we even got it out for a floor vote once when Naomi Jacobson was state representative, and 40 legislators voted for it. The big thing that changed this year was the legislators' own frustration that they allocate money for housing programs, just like you are, and the money is not necessarily getting used as well as it should be because of discrimination. And it's sad that that's what it takes, but whatever it takes to get people to stand up to discrimination, that's fine with me. And you spend a lot of government money, and you include it, and it includes programs that face challenges because of people's lack of cooperation due to prejudice. And I hope that in the coming weeks and months, you will help in promoting awareness and enforcement of this law so that every housing dollar we actually do get for any kind of subsidy or rent assistance will be used. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I will add that that letter that you sent us goes to the clerk as well, and we'll ask that it be put in the public record as you specified. Would anyone else like to address the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole? Please approach the mic. If so, don't see anyone here that wishes to. Is there any communication that council members received that needs to be read? Seeing none, we will close public input, and we will move on to staff reports, if we have any. No staff standing up to give a report. We'll move on to new business, and we're going to start out with resolution number 2023-04-29R. The CDBG Senior Repair Program Agreement between the City of Urbana and Champaign County Regional Planning Commission.
Good evening. The City of Urbana has offered a senior repair program for over 20 years. However, staffing constraints made the program difficult to manage. So under this agreement, the city will provide $60,000 in community development block grant funding to RPC for the direct administration and management of this program on behalf of the city. RPC staff will meet with the Urbana homeowners, screen applications in order to verify program eligibility, complete an environmental review record, and manage the rehabilitation process. While at the home, RPC staff will be able to assess and refer the clients to any additional services they may need, such as Meals on Wheels or, any type of health services they may need. This is the second agreement that we are bringing forward to you. We just are completing the end of June, our first one, and it's been very successful. Executing this agreement will meet the annual action plan goal of providing decent, safe, and sanitary housing to low-income residents. The agreement will also allow the city to continue a valuable program while preserving the capacity of city staff to administer other housing rehabilitation programs. Staff and the Community Development Commission are recommending a 2-year program agreement covering fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25. This agreement will be contingent upon the city's receipt of community development block grant funding and RPC's successful completion of the grant in its first year. We anticipate serving 12 to 15 people per year. Questions?
Any questions? Yes, Mary Alice.
Sheila, can you give us some examples of things that have been done with these funds?
Sure. These are very small repairs, like a storm door or if a window is broke. They're usually less than a couple $1,000s. And that RPC has a similar program that they run, and they also run a similar program for Champaign. So it's just those very small, minor repairs that they can do for seniors or person with disabilities.
So if a senior has a need, they would contact RPC, and then RPC would figure out where the funding comes from?
Right. And sometimes they reach out to us first, or if RPC gets to the home, like say there's a leak in this underneath the sink, we might think it's small to begin with, but then once we get there or RPC gets there, they realize that it's going to cost more than their program limit. They'll send them back to us. We share the documents to avoid, having to have the customer give us the same thing again, and then we put them through our emergency repair grant.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Sharice.
Will this also cover anything like if a senior's home needs a new sidewalk or driveway or path or something like that, or porch?
Yeah, typically, no. The federal funding, they want to be used for the house itself. So we might be able to do a ramp, but we can't really do the sidewalks or, depending on what the porch needs are. But typically, it's the interior of the home. And I'm guessing that kind of project is going to be more than the 2,000, so it would come back through us for our emergency repair program.
Okay.
Yes, Grace.
Thanks for the presentation, Sheila. And I have a few questions trying to understand the context of the situation here. And because you're saying staffing constraints, and I imagine too, since these are smaller repairs, it's more numerous. Is that right?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to matter. I mean, those of you that deal with grants, whether it's a $2,000 project or a $20,000 project, the staff effort is the same. So being able to partner with RPC, we feel like it's a better customer service to the client because, like I said, RPC assesses other needs they might have while they're there, and it frees up some of our staff time for our bigger projects.
And so it's kind of my other question is in there too, because there's also the ARPA request for home repairs or roof repairs.
Right, we're
And is
managing
this kind
that.
of making room for that in a sense? Like, is there the staff capacity to manage that?
Yeah, we are doing that program through our emergency repair program, and we currently have 4 applications pending. And somebody called last week where they saw the program at the council meeting and are getting ready to apply. So hopefully we'll get a few projects done before June 30.
Great. And is there CDBG funds, it seems like, can be used for these kinds of ones? Can we funnel any other CDBG funds that we have that we're needing to spend into programs like this?
Actually, I have good news on that. We did our timeliness test today, and we are below what we're supposed to be. So we've been busy spending money through John's infrastructure projects, and then Fire bought some medical equipment, and so we are fine with the timeliness test.
Thank you.
No other questions? Could I have a motion?
I'll give a
Mary
motion.
Alice.
I want to move to, on the consent agenda, resolution number 2023-04029R, CDBG Senior Repair Program Agreement between the City of Urbana and Champaign County Regional Planning Commission.
Thank
Second.
you. I have a second from Sharice, I think.
Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right, any further discussion? This is a resolution, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Let's move on to resolution number 2023-04-028R. A resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement concerning Boneyard Creek project.
All right, hello again. This one's pretty straightforward. I know there's a lot of documentation here. Short of it is we have an intergovernmental agreement with UCSD for cost sharing of the Boneyard Creek project. This is referring to the Boneyard Creek segment number 3 bank stabilization, which is the project located just west of Broadway Avenue. We're going to be protecting the north and the north bank as it goes from Broadway west and south down to the railroad tracks. And so as we expanded this project from its original conception, now a third of the area is going to be covered by UCSD, approximately a third of it, because of the location of their sanitary sewer that crosses the creek. You'll get a good aerial imagery here, or not aerial, plans. And so UCSD has a couple of large diameter sewers that cross above the creek, and so we're going to add the riprap here to make sure it's stabilized and protected. So this resolution would give the mayor authority essentially to sign this IGA on the city's behalf. The nature of the cost share is related to these quantities that were agreed upon with UCSD's engineer, kind of distributing, what's Urbana costs, what's UCSD costs, and the largest item being the riprap itself, and you can see about 80 square yards will be for UCSD out of 253, so that's about a third, give or take. I will say a really good news I have to share is that we had a budget here of, it was $545,000, I think, and we opened bids on Friday. Actually got really good bids. We have a low bid of $243,000 that we are planning to award, so we were very happy with that. This is a challenging project to estimate because the difficult access along the creek with with private businesses and whatnot made, if you remember when we came around in August to try to bid this project, we got pretty high prices that came in. So we worked carefully to make the access easier for the contractors, and it really showed. So what I know I've got here in the council packet, this has doesn't have the bid prices in there. It doesn't have the actual number in. If it's all right with council, what I'd like to do is to update that document with the bid that we received, the bid that we'll award, and so then for next week you can have that full amount in the document when you go to approve it. We also have a few edits that we got from the UCSD attorney kind of late in the game. They're happy to share that with you guys and to show you kind of what the changes were. They're fairly minor in nature, but if that's okay, I'd like to just kind of provide you with some changes for next week, and we can move that along. So is there any questions?
Yes, Sharice.
Okay, I was going through this and I was just like lost, because what I am not is an architect or city engineer or civic engineer or any kind of engineer. Can you just tell me exactly what you're going to be doing with Boneyard so that I can have an understanding of like the construction that's going to happen? Because I really did not understand it. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, and that's on me. I need to try to make it digestible. So let's see. Let me get to this. This plan view shows some of the proposed areas. So this is Broadway Avenue where my cursor is, and we're heading west. North is up, heading west. There's 3 pockets of work here. There's this first one in the northeast corner. There's one there kind of in the middle, and there's one in the southwest corner, which is next to the UCSD pipes. And the short of it is that we've got bank erosion that's happening. It's really bad in the spot just west of Broadway. And that was kind of the impetus for this whole project. But we have other areas where we can make improvements and protect it. This one's along the kind of this boardwalk out here. And essentially what we're doing is we're going to be using larger diameter stones. This RR4 riprap is typically about the size of a volleyball, give or take. And we're just going to use that to build back that bank that got washed away, essentially. And the kind of an extra measure in that northeast corner, we're going to use 36-inch diameter boulders as like a really heavy, sturdy bottom to that bank, at the toe of the slope. And a couple other features we'll do. These candy canes, they look like candy canes in the plan. They are called J-hooks. And what they do is they train the stream to, instead of putting its full force against the bank, because it's trying to make a turn, the water is trying to make a turn. So what the shape does is it makes the water kind of turn faster, so it doesn't put as much force into the bank.
Okay.
So it's a river training device. We'll try to help alleviate this from just growing, continuing to grow. Yeah.
Okay, because the only thing I really had when as far as a reference is trying to think of on Venice Beach where they have the stones put so that not so much erosion happens with the beach, so that the sand doesn't wash out into the ocean. So they have a lot of stones and they build them on top of each other. That's that's the only way that I
That's-
could put it through my head
That's
to try
perfect.
to.
This is where, okay, like, you know, civil engineering is definitely not computer science or computer engineering. We're using really heavy stuff to like weigh this down so it doesn't get washed away.
Okay.
It's a really good example of the shoreline stable, same idea. Yep.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't in my head wrong.
Okay, Chris.
John, to follow up on Sharice's questions, part of this project was beautification, and I'm assuming that the technique that you just described maintains the beauty of the project. Is that true, or? If I find rocks beautiful, I don't know. but-
In the eye of the beholder, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll say that is not the primary objective of what
okay.
we're trying to do. I know that was really the benefit of the Boneyard Creek crossing improvements that were done. We really just want to try to keep this bank from getting away from us. So,
Right, well,
yeah.
that's probably the more important priority. I guess my other question, does it have any effect on the way the silt keeps washing up on the sidewalks of the walkway?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. This is downstream of that, so this is after that problem happens. And I know that Carmen's been working with one of our engineering firms to apply for a grant to try to help us with that sedimentation problem. We have some ideas of maybe trapping that sediment upstream before it gets to the park area.
Yeah, I don't want to lose the ability of people being able to kind of, step down and soak their feet in the water, which is what is designed to do, but it also is creating all this silt washing up on the sidewalk. But thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, Grace.
Thanks for the info. Do we have a guess on how long this is anticipated to last? Like, I know it seems like just a constant effort with water and erosion, but like this fix in particular, does it have an estimate how long this would last, or how long it will be before we have to redo this in this area?
Well, I don't have an intelligent estimate, I wouldn't say. I know that the gabion baskets that were installed just right next to Broadway, west of Broadway, and also east of Broadway, those gabions, I don't recall if those are 10 years old or more, but those have been holding up really well. And basically what's happening is at the edge of the gabions is where this erosion is happening. The nice thing about this simple riprap method, what we're doing is maintaining it can just look as much as like as simple as putting more rock on top. If it were to settle or to remove some, you basically just put more rock on top of it. Other methods of bank stabilization are not as flexible in that regard. But definitely, and that's part of what the J-hooks are intended to do, is the hope that then the parts of the bank that we're not covering with rock, that will mitigate some of those erosive forces on there. So we don't want to we don't want to have to put riprap on every foot of our creek if we can help it. So
Thank you.
Yes, Reese.
So the J-hooks are going to be an added thing to the riprap that's already in that area, in those areas? Because I see riprap, and I see J-hook.
mm-hmm.
So the J-hooks, how big are those? Are they like going across the whole river bed?
They don't go across the whole riverbed. They those little hook parts are in the middle of the stream, and then the arms of them stick into the bank some. I don't know if they're 5 feet long even. They're not very big.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a vision. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Yes, Mary Alice.
I make a motion?
Sure.
All right, I'm not going to put this on the consent agenda because you're going to update some numbers. So I will move resolution number 2023-04028R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement concerning Boneyard Creek project to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Seconded by Jaya. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. Next up, we have a resolution number 20, thank you, John. Resolution number 2023-04-030R, a resolution approving the transfer of volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues, single-family mortgage revenue bonds, and related matters related to private bond cap allocation, IDA program series 2023. There's another resolution here. Are we supposed to be putting these together? It doesn't have its own number. Is everybody okay with us
Typically,
taking
you
these
put
one?
them together, but that's up to you.
There's separate resolutions listed here.
I'll make a motion to put them together, if that helps.
That would be to combine the discussion with resolution number 2023-04-031R, a resolution approving the transfer of volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues, single-family mortgage revenue bonds, and related matters, private bond cap allocation, IHDA, Series 2023.
You want me to repeat that?
Well,
I make a motion
have-
to what James just said.
Put those two together. Thank you,
Yes,
Chris.
please, yeah.
I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mary Alice. All those in favor of combining those two into one omnibus action, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, we'll talk about both of them.
Great, thank you. Private activity bond is a tax-exempt bond issued by a local or state government for financing a project owned and operated by a private user. Private activity bonds are issued to finance various types of facilities, including multifamily housing projects and single-family dwellings. Private activity bonds issued by the city are special obligations and do not constitute a debt or indebtedness of the city and do not give rise to a charge against the general credit or taxing power of the city. In accordance with the IRS code, each municipality in Illinois is allowed to issue private activity bonds at $120 per capita population, which is estimated at $38,681 for 2023. The state of Illinois outlines the per capita amount and the population size for this calculation. The state of Illinois will recapture any bond allocation unused by the city as of May 1st of this year. The city of Urbana has a total of $4,641,720 in 2023 private activity bond cap available that may be used for multifamily affordable housing projects, nonprofit developments, industrial development projects, below market rate financing for affordable housing, mortgage credit certificates, and below market rate financing for limited types of industrial development. We received 2 requests for the bond cap this year, one from IDA, Illinois Housing Development Authority, who uses the volume cap for a variety of purposes, but in a high-level overview, their main uses consist of either the single-family or their multifamily programs. On the single-family side, the authority issues tax-exempt debt that traditionally allows for lower cost of funds to create first mortgages and down payment assistance loans across the state of Illinois. The seeding of volume cap, which the city of Urbana and the authority have engaged in over the last several years, helps contribute to the overall affordable housing efforts within the city of Urbana. On the multifamily programs, the use of volume cap is used in conjunction with low-income housing tax credits. The low-income housing tax credits give investors a dollar-for-dollar reduction in their federal tax liability in exchange for providing financing to develop affordable rental housing. Investors' equity contribution subsidizes low-income housing development, thus allowing some units to rent at below market rate. In return, investors receive tax credits paid in annual allotments, generally over 10 years. Eastern Illinois Economic Development Authority meets the economic development needs of an 11-county area, which includes Champaign County. EIEDA identifies potential development partners through referrals from the State Bond Council, the city, and the Illinois Advantage Trade Association. Developers interested in accessing tax exemption through bonds can contact EIEDA directly. Eligible types of development projects include both market rate and affordable housing, as well as mixed use and commercial developments. When ceding the bond authority, the city cedes decision-making authority to determine eligible projects. EIEDA has indicated that as we approach an increasing interest rate environment, tax-exempt bonds financing becomes an attractive tool for developers. Funds will be available to developers of eligible economic development or affordable housing projects in Champaign County. EIEDA identifies potential development partners through referrals, and developers interested in accessing tax exemption bonds can reach out to EIEDA directly. The Community Development Commission, along with staff, recommends splitting the allocation between the two agencies for $2,320,860 each. CDC, along with staff, recommend the committee send the resolutions to council on the consent agenda. And I believe IDA and EIEDA are on the phone if you have any questions.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to move this omnibus action to city council.
Do we have to state the whole thing again, since we already kind
I
of?
don't think you have to, but
Okay, I'll make a motion. Resolution number, let me make sure I got everything correct. 2023-04-0330R and resolution number 2023-04-031R. Resolution approving, I'll read them anyway. Respectively, resolution approving the transfer of volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues, single-family mortgage revenue bonds and related matters, private bond cap allocation, i.e. EIEDA Programs Series 2023, and a resolution approving the transfer of a volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues, single-family mortgage revenue bonds, and related matters, private bond cap allocation, IHDA Series 2023, be moved to a consent agenda for approval.
thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded by Chair. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. We'll move on to resolution number 2023-04-032R, a resolution approving the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium, Urbana, Champaign County, Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 2023 through 2024.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I presented a more in-depth look at our annual action plan back on March 27th. So just as a little bit of a refresher, the annual action plan outlines the activities that the City of Urbana, along with the Urbana Home Consortium, will be undertaking in the 2023-2024 fiscal year, utilizing funds from two HUD grant programs, the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Investment Partnership. So on page 16 of the plan are the expected resources that Urbana and the consortium will be receiving for these two respective programs in the 2023-2024 fiscal year. We will be receiving $498,343 in Community Development Block Grant funding, and that is funding that will just be spent within the City of Urbana. And then the consortium, which includes the City of Urbana, City of Champaign, and Champaign County, will be receiving $779,013 in home funding. The budgets for both of these programs can be found included with your memo. I believe it's the third page. And then more information on the activities can also be found in the memo as well. So the big thing that I wanted to highlight since I was last here on March 27th is the public input that we received. So the plan was open to public comment from March 1st through March 31st. We engaged various community groups to get feedback on what are the needs in the community. I wanted to thank Esther Pat for her comments tonight as well. That really does reflect a lot of what we heard when we did public input on our plan. We also sent out a survey to the community just to get input on what needs people are seeing in their neighborhoods, how they think these funds can be used. And again, it echoes a lot of what Esther mentioned earlier. I'll just highlight a couple other things, and I'll also mention the survey results are included in your packet as well. Just a few high-level things we found. Survey respondents expressed a need for additional infrastructure improvements in their neighborhoods, including street lighting, improved sidewalks, as well as improvement to public spaces such as parks. That is a consistent comment that we have received over the years. We also received comments in support of additional youth violence prevention programming that was identified as a high priority. And then, again, the rising cost of housing and the housing affordability crisis was also identified by respondents. 87% of survey respondents said that rent in Urbana is too high, and 50% of respondents indicated that finding an affordable unit was a significant barrier to securing housing. And so we believe that the budget of our annual action plan reflects these needs that were identified. So staff is requesting approval of this resolution on the consent agenda, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, questions? Grace?
Thanks so much for the info here. And I know this is a complicated thing we've been through before. I'll try and remember what we've already gone through. And also understanding that, right, this is a certain specific template that needs to be used, right? So I'm trying to understand page 36, the affordable housing, and it says the 1-year goal and 0 homeless individuals supported. And I know we've got the TBRA and we've got other things in here. So I don't know if you could explain, is that just a weird part of this template, or am I misinterpreting this?
Are you under the AP 35 projects?
Page 36, AP 55, affordable housing.
I don't have that section in front of me. Oh, do you have it? Oh, page 36. Oh, okay. 1-year goal. Yeah, that I wouldn't say that probably needs to be changed. If you look at the AP 35 projects, that's going to be the best area to look. I will look into potentially changing this before we submit it to HUD. If you look at the AP 35, which begins on page 26, that outlines the projects that we've budgeted for this following fiscal year, and you'll see it breaks down, the project name, the goals that are supported, the amount of funding that's being committed to that project, and then also there's an estimate of the number and type of families that will benefit. That's where we estimate, the number of households that will be served, and then we also discuss in a little bit more detail the planned activities. So this is where you'll see, so for example, the neighborhood revitalization, but also under the home program, you'll see where, I think it's, if you go to, there's the home Chodo reserve, which that's the funding that we have, our home funding that we reserve for our community housing development organizations such as First Followers and Habitat for Humanity that actually develop affordable housing. And you'll see in those sections the number of housing that we intend to generate with that funding. And then you'll see the home ARP funding that we received, the different areas. So for example, home ARP supportive services, which are for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. You'll also see the home ARP acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter. That's on page 33. We're anticipating serving 30 homeless or at risk of homeless families with that funding. Also development of affordable rental housing. You see we're estimating 15 household units created. That's on page 33. So that's reflects the numbers that we're estimating. This page 36, I'll double check that. I don't believe that would be accurate. So thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions? Yes, Grace?
One more detail, if you still, do you still have Mary Alice's one there on
Yes, I
page
do.
33? So I was looking also this project 13, and so that one is construction of 4 new affordable housing units or rehabilitation of 15 units for $1 million. And could you remind me what units were? I thought units here, we were talking about like individual dwelling places, not like a complex, right? Because for me, I was just trying to figure out the numbers. That seems kind of high for 250,000 for construction of an affordable single unit, right?
Yeah, that's the amount we're estimating, again, with rising development costs in terms of materials and things like that. That could change. That's our estimate at this point. So that could change. It could be more. It could be less. That's how much we're estimating right now. And then when our CAPER is done in September, that's where we capture really what we actually were able to generate. So that's what we're estimating, but it could change. And then that's reflected in the fall when we have our actual report of what we did.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Anybody ready to make a motion? Treese?
I'll make a motion to, I do have, oh, okay, I'll make the motion first. Resolution number 2023-04-032R, resolution approving the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium be moved to consent agenda for approval.
Would you mind making that not to consent since we have that page that needs to be updated?
Okay, regular agenda for approval.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mary Alice. Any further discussion? Jaya?
I'm just going to note that I will be voting present because CDBG funds for youth services grants are funds that an organization I'm affiliated with might apply for.
Thank you, Jaya. Treese?
Of course, I guess, one of the main questions, and I know that we really can't solve this issue. Is there any way that the state would be willing or capable, the legislators that we have, of taking the ban off of rent control? That I know a lot of the people complain about the cost of rent in Urbana, and the main thing that I see as a obstacle is the fact that Illinois, the state of Illinois, doesn't allow rent control. At least that's my understanding. Or is that not in place anymore after the fair housing thing? I don't see how you can get fair housing and not have rent control some kind of way either.
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a lot of advocacy going on right now, on what can be done, to bring down the cost of rent. So I think that's definitely something for exploration. I think on our end, kind of in terms of the grant funds we get, we're looking more at that supply side. How can we actually develop more affordable units for extremely low income, residents who can't afford that market rate? So that's kind of what this plan really focuses on. But I think there is a lot of good questions around those other issues. I don't know the answer specifically as to what that law or regulation is.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that on the record because one of the main things that I think keeps many cities in Illinois from being able to be more benevolent regarding housing and cost of housing is the fact that as a government entity, we don't control landlords' ownership. We don't control that ownership, and therefore, and because of the legislation, we don't control how they charge rents, and it makes it very difficult, not just for those who are experiencing that, but for us as a agency that is a benefactor, in this particular issue, to have any kind of real say. We do what we can do, and so I was just wondering, on the staff side, if there were any new steps being made in that direction. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, when we talk about affordable housing, primarily, where does this affordable housing get built? Where is it going to be in the city of Urbana?
That's a great question. It really depends on a lot of factors, which lots the city owns, things like that. We have received public comment in the past that residents would like affordable housing to be, in the center of town, near services, near MTD stops, near jobs and employment. So that's definitely something we take into account when we're kind of thinking about locations. But it can be hard because there is sometimes a lot of resistance in neighborhoods, people not wanting things in their backyard, and perceptions of what affordable housing means, what it looks like. So I think there's also a lot of ongoing education that can be done about, what it really will look like and how it will actually operate in the community. So it depends on, again, what land is available at the time, but then also through our other programs, for example, like our tenant-based rental assistance programs, those would allow people to live anywhere in Urbana, not necessarily in a dedicated unit, but any unit where there's again that rental voucher to provide rent. So I think that's kind of that scattered site is really beneficial, and a lot of people prefer that, where they can really have the flexibility to live anywhere they want in Urbana and not have to just go to one neighborhood or one area.
Okay, thank you.
All right. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously.
Just noting again, I'm voting present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will note that Jay has voted present. Madam Clerk. Sorry about that. Next up, we have a number of resolutions regarding ARPA agreements based on the work that we did to put together funding. I think I might have heard someone talking earlier about the possibility of packaging these together. I hope it's someone with a lot of lung capacity, because we could consider that. I would suggest that we go ahead and do the resolution to put them together so that we can discuss about each one in the discussion that follows, if that's okay.
Do you want a motion before we even do the presentation, or you want to?
If council will allow, we can have the presentation and then do the omnibus motion as opposed to presentation for each one. Is everybody agreeable to that, Sharice?
Before we do make an omnibus, I guess a point of order, I don't know. There's one resolution that I'd like to set apart from the rest of the resolutions so that we can have a more involved discussion. And that would be the Tiny Homes Hope Village.
Okay. All right. So is everybody okay with having a discussion first and then packaging things up and working from there? All right. All right. Let's have the
That's great.
presentation, Will.
I packaged them all up in my presentation, so I'm glad we do it that way. So before the council today are 10 ARPA sub-recipient agreements. City Council approved these ARPA projects when we
Speak louder, Will.
And City Council approved the projects when the project list was approved on February 22nd. And then as part of that resolution, each sub-recipient was then required to enter into a contract that details the dates, the funding timeline, and some performance standards for that project. City Council also released the funds for these projects on the budget amendment that was voted on April 10th. So with the project list approved and funding made available, these contracts are the last step of the approval process. So we've tried to structure all the contracts in the same way. So the main body of the sub-recipient agreement contains all the standards, terms and conditions, legalese that's applicable to all projects. And then we've tried to put all of the project-specific information in Project A to make it easy to kind of review and monitor over time. So in Exhibit A is kind of the meat of each project from a contractual standpoint. And then, so there's the narrative summary, there's key objectives and measurable outcomes that are identified. And that will be included in the project reports by the subrecipients. There's the start and end dates. There's a section that details any changes to the project scope and any additional terms and conditions. And then there is a funding timeline that shows kind of how much is being spent by quarter, what we think will be, the anticipated timeline for each ARPA expense, and then what the corresponding reimbursement would be. So then, as part of attachment A, the application, executive summary, and presentation by the subrecipients are incorporated into this attachment, so that the application is really the standard expectation of what's going to occur unless it's otherwise specified in the contract somewhere. So just a few things to note on the timeline is that we were very specific in how much was going to be spent and when the money was going to be spent by quarter. So we have in the contract, if what we expect and what actually occurs varies by a certain amount, the subrecipients are required to come back and create an amended timeline. And the purpose of that is just since we're on there's time is essential for these projects. And then our standard method of payment for these was quarterly reimbursements, although with some applicants there were some cash flow issues, so what we kind of worked to a compromise for some folks was quarterly upfront payments. And for subrecipients who have quarterly upfront payments, there's additional terms and conditions. Generally speaking, it's just related to their ability to actually spend those funds in that particular quarter. So it could be an invoice, it could be proof of securing other funds for the project, issued building permit, things like that nature. So that's kind of the main overall condition for anybody who has a quarterly upfront payment. So with regard to the projects, I think all the exciting things about them have already been said. So I don't really have much to add to that. If there's any questions, I can answer them tonight. We'll be doing another batch of questions, so if there's a big discussion item, they don't necessarily have to resolve it at this very moment. And I think there's also some applicants here who can answer questions as they come up.
All right, Chris.
I think you just answered it. I'm counting 10. I remember us approving 25 projects, so there's going to be another round of these resolutions. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we did it as we got them.
All right, Mary Alice.
Thank you, Will. A lot of paper to go through. For those of you who haven't seen it, this is the stack. Anyway, so my question is this: I mean, some of the places on here are pretty easy for us to see that they are going to Urbana residents. The Urbana Free Library, for example, is going to be working with Urbana residents. So for those entities that may cross over into other populations, what assurances do we have that the money will be spent for Urbana?
So there's not a specific term in the contract that says it must be Urbana residents. Taking a step backwards, the ARPA guideline was Urbana funds have to be proportionally affect Urbana residents, so it wasn't exclusive to Urbana residents if it's a countywide initiative, for example. So unless it was otherwise kind of mentioned in the public input or the council discussions, we didn't, the RPC or the city, we didn't add anything preemptively on that particular subject. Some of them, I know one, I think it was the counseling, since it was 50% of what they asked for, that was solely what they put their money towards, but there's not a overarching condition that we have in these contracts for that.
So I realize that it's not a big ticket item with the Common Ground Food Co-op, but it is something that I brought up because we had asked whether or not the Common Ground could identify people who were from Urbana, because since people have to run. So, but I didn't see that in this contract. I'm not entirely sure if I missed something since there's a lot of paper here.
I can check, but I don't know off the top of my head either, but we can go back to them and ask them if they're willing to put that in there.
They specifically said that they could identify those people.
Okay.
As I said, it's not a big amount of money, but.
Yes, Grace.
Yes, also want to say thank you for this update and things, Will. And I was just also curious a little bit about the process. So it sounds like, did you sit down with each organization? And I don't know if there was anything else to share about that process. It seems like you were able to find creative ways to make a pared-down budget work with the applicants. Is that right? I was wondering if there's anything else you could share with us about the process itself.
Yeah, so the RPC and us, we had a draft contract that we sent to each applicant and asked them to fill it out with changes that they needed to make in order to make it work for the funding. And they came back to us with, whatever the proposed changes. And with the batch that's here today, nobody really requested substantial changes to the project scope. It was, if the money was less, doing a little bit less, or we'll find the money elsewhere. So there really weren't too many changes to work through. Generally speaking, if a project comes and they need to change it, we'll work with them to suggest, ways that they can work it in. And if they still say, no, we can't use this money unless this change occurs, then that'll come before council, and we'll highlight that there.
I just want to reiterate what Mary Alice said. I thought we also had a similar conversation about the Habitat first-time home ownership counseling to be focused on Urbana residents. It's clear that the Urbana Community Peace Hub is focused, from First Followers, is focused on Urbana. Sol Gratia is in Urbana. Well experiences in Urbana, serves Urbana schools. Neighborhood Connections serves Urbana. So those seem to be the only two. Given what we're doing for the Eastern Illinois Food Bank, I don't know if it made sense to have a clarification there. But those two, the Common Ground Food Co-op and Habitat, I distinctly remember the request that we talk about that in the contract process. And I don't know if that interrupts their being approved tonight, or if that's something that's going to have to go through some more conversation.
So we can reach out to them this week, and if they don't get back in time, we can always delay until we hear back from them. But I think everybody's been pretty responsive, so, and then we'll come back with another batch of applicants. I don't know if it'll be the next committee of the whole, but at the very least, the one after that, so. The delay, if there is a delay, it shouldn't be too long.
Yes, Mary Alice.
I'd just like to make a suggestion to the chair that that we attempted to put everything together except for the two that we want clarification on, and Carl, since
Okay.
if that's okay with the chair.
Yeah, I think so. Jaya?
We also do have someone from Habitat, I think, who would like to speak to that question.
Okay. Can you come to the mic so the
Yeah.
folks at home can? Not the people at home, unfortunately.
That's true. So Habitat did make a clarification when we sent back our budget, and that was part of that, where we said, since the funding we requested was cut in half, and we serve Champaign-Urbana pretty equally, basically all the funding that was provided for Urbana would then go to serve Urbana residents, is how we did word that. So we did acknowledge that in our piece that we sent back. You started to mention that too at the beginning there, that we had made that change.
I remember reading that. It's just a question whether or not that made it to the final version of that everybody saw here, but.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jaya.
All right,
So, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask for a motion to put together the following components so that somebody doesn't have to read all these at once. And these are resolutions approving authorization for execution of an ARPA sub-recipient agreement, which would include resolutions starting with number 2023-04, and that's 018R for the Urbana Free Library, 019R for the Eastern Illinois Food Bank, 020R for Red Herring Restaurant, 24R for First Followers, 25R for Sola Gratia Farm, 26R for the Well Experience, and 27R for Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center Boost. And so I would entertain a motion to put those together in an omnibus fashion.
All right, I'm going to attempt this. I would like to make a motion that we put together the following
Yeah.
resolutions.
I'll take Jay as so moved.
You just say so moved. He
Okay,
already read
so
them.
moved. We don't have to say all of it? Usually they make.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, usually we.
Okay. All right, you can do it then.
I enumerated them. I identified them distinctly.
All right, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I move to omnibus the following resolutions. Resolution number 2023-04018R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Urbana Free Library. And resolution number 2023-04019R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Eastern Illinois Food Bank. And resolution number 2023-04020R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Red Herring Restaurant. And resolution number 2023-04024R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with First Followers. And resolution number 2023-04025R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Sola Gracia Farm. And resolution number 2023-04026R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Well Experience. And finally, resolution number 2023-04027R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Urbana Neighborhood Connections Center Boost.
And while you take a quick breath, Will has just shown me that those two that we just questioned have language in them specifying Urbana. So if you
So
want
I
to
should add two
pin
more.
those on the end.
Okay, then we will add two to those. Resolution number 2023-04021R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Common Ground Food Co-op. And finally, resolution number 2023-04022R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Habitat for Humanity of Champaign County.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Jaya. She gets the short one anyway. All right, any further discussion on putting them together? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Now I would entertain a motion to move that combined group to City Council for the consent agenda.
And we have
for
no
approval.
numbers to read for this one because we just read them all. So I'll make a motion that we move to the consent agenda, that giant omnibus.
Yeah. Did I hear you second,
Second.
Chris? Oh, okay.
If Chris didn't
I heard-
already.
I heard Jay second. All right, any further discussion on the main motion of the big group? Yes, Grace?
Just want to say thanks again to all these great groups that have applied and doing a lot of great work in the community, and some we see here today. Thank you for your patience in this process. I hope it's been not too challenging. And thank you again to all of our staff here at the city and RPC and everyone who's made this possible. I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing all of this federal money being used for this purpose and getting out in the community finally. So thank you for your patience with this process and looking forward to good things to come. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Grace. Jaya?
Ditto.
Thank you, Jaya. All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Then we need a motion for the one we didn't do, which is
Number
23.
10.
Number 10.
Yeah, number 10.
Go ahead.
I would move resolution number 2023-04-023R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement, Carl/Hope Village, to the consent agenda for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Grace, a second by Jaya. Any discussion? Therese?
Because I see the Champaign County Health applicants and Marty from Carl, could you guys come up and just give more information about this particular project?
Do you have a specific question, Therese?
Yeah.
Okay,
But I just want to make sure that they're able to
Come
talk
on up.
about it.
You can go there, or you can sit at the table and use those microphones if you wish.
I had the privilege of having discussions with them after we voted on this, and because I do have some issues, not just with how it was going to be put together, but I had issues with the location. And so the location will be in where the Union Gardens property was, and I'm assuming you all have already acquired that property.
Just make sure that you're using a microphone and it's turned on and it's within about an inch of your mouth.
Yes,
So-
we have closed on the property at 1799 Federal Drive.
So what I want is just that you give more information for public regarding your plans on how, because you showed me great renditions and everything, and I told you my particular problems with that, which was more of a kind of a, what I didn't like, I don't like using the word, but ghettotizing of the North End because of this particular thing. And I was told that, well, the property has, it's close to electrical and sanitary, and it's ready to go. And the issue I have, of course, is the NIMBYism that is going to be me right now. So I want you to be able to speak your piece.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Hershey. I think the concern about location is going to be prevalent no matter where we go on a project like this. And I will say that we intend to really make a strong effort in engaging the neighborhood and the surrounding communities where the Hope Village has been sited. It is zoned already R4, which is within the zoning of a project like this. We are meeting with the city this week to look at other approval processes. I believe text amendments may be in order and what have you to satisfy the zoning requirements. We have research projects across the country of similar type of construction and design. This location really does meet a lot of the requirements. One, the zoning. Two, it's vacant farmland right now. Utilities are to the site. It is an affordable land site to build on. And we have the ability with access from not only the residential portion of this site, but also the commercial portion on the north end. Again, we have the ability with the amount of land to provide proper buffer and amenities for the neighborhood as well as the village itself. And again, we fully intend to proceed with engagement in the neighborhood, full transparency with the project. And we are currently moving forward with the AE selection, and we'll begin the design process and master planning within the next 2 weeks, and hope to have more to show and more to come as it relates to the project with the next 4 to 6 weeks.
And I just wanted to state that my main issue is that even with your location, and it's great for you, the biggest problem that I have too is that there aren't the essential services in the area that I think are needed. Not would be needed, they just are needed. They're not just needed for your project, but for the North End in general. No grocery stores, no drugstores, no bank services. Those are issues that I have not fear about, but a little trepidation regarding how successful this particular project can work. So, and I also just don't want to see, and Marty, you and I was pretty blunt with what I would think some people in my ward would consider kind of a land grab by Carl, because it's going to be another nonprofit thing that's going up with basically Carl-owned property, meaning no property taxes. And I think that does not help build the value of the homes in the area. So I wanted to make sure that I had that stated and on the record.
So I think there's a couple of points there. One, that the amenities that we're bringing to the village and the residents of the village will also end up being an amenity for the surrounding neighborhood
and the community with a mobile clinic coming on a regular basis. We have a grocer bus that will be coming to the village and will be available for the surrounding neighborhoods and the community. So I think there'll be a shared benefit, that this really shouldn't be an us and them kind of situation.
I'm not trying to make
I
it
think we
that.
are addressing a serious need in our community with the most vulnerable. And this is going to be this project can be a model for other communities across the country. There's no projects out there at this point, of all the ones that we've researched, that combine the design and construction of permanent supportive housing, along with this intense casework and wraparound services that Claudia and the CCHCC will bring to the project, and the benefit with the University of Illinois as another collaborative partner that's going to offer translational research and in-service learning after the project stood up. So we have the opportunity here to do something really special, and I think it's going to be a model for other communities across the country. It is going to be some hard work. There are going to be some tough issues that we're going to have to deal with, but we're not coming in naive. We're not coming in without the sensitivity that this is a project for the community. It's a collaborative project within the community. This is not a Carl project. It is not a University of Illinois project, and it's not a CCHCC project. It's a collaborative effort to create a real community asset here. When the project's done and constructed, it will be conveyed to a not-for-profit organization. It will not be owned by Carl. It will not be owned by the University of Illinois or our collaborative partner, CCHCC.
It will be owned by whom?
By a not-for-profit organization. I'll let John address that.
Yeah, but just going to follow up on what Marty, the work to establish a new 501c3 is underway, and so as Marty mentioned, it will be the ownership of that will be transferred to that new body, which will be governed by the sort of our three founding partners, as well as hopefully down the road some additional community partners who excel in this space.
Okay. Go ahead. Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this has always been the plan, that it would be owned and operated by an independent 501c3 organization. We were starting that process to develop that, but it takes several months to do that. And we didn't want to pass up the opportunity to apply for funding. And we felt that Carl was the best partner among the three of us to be the lead applicant for that. But I think it's really important for the council and for the community to understand that this is ultimately going to all be operated under a 501c3 that is in the process of creation now.
Chris, I saw your hand up next.
Marty answered all my questions.
All right, thank you. Jan?
Yeah, I want to thank the applicants for being willing to take questions. We're, at a point where we're looking at the specifics of contracts. We've already agreed on the certain amount of funding. Excuse me. So I appreciate the additional feedback. As stated, this is something our community desperately needs. And I think when we think about opportunities that come with ARPA, this is something that has the potential to have meaningful, long-term impact on our community. So I'm very excited to be moving this forward tonight.
All right, further questions? All right, yes, well.
I'll just add that in the contract, it does mention that the governance of the project will be turned over to the new LLC or the new 501c3. So that is already into the contract where once it gets up and running, it will be turned over.
All right, I think we already had a motion. This is discussion. So, Mary Alice?
So I guess what I want to say is I think that this opportunity has been really exciting to allow different kinds of ideas to be able to populate in our community. This is one of those types of ideas that I don't think really would have been possible without this kind of infusion of funds. So I was really excited to learn more about other organizations that maybe we hadn't heard from before. The Well experience was new to me. I know it's not new to everybody. The Hope Village was something that I've heard about it, but really didn't know what the path forward was for our community. So I'm really happy that we have three really strong groups of people coming together to try and see this vision through. So I just wanted to say in general, with the ARPA funds, I am very thankful for everybody's ideas, even the people that we didn't fund. A lot of people had some really good ideas, and so I'm glad we're here at the final stage. There you go.
Thank you for your answers. I will call the question.
you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay.
Nay.
That motion passes. We have reached the end of our new business, so it is now time for council input and communications. Any council input or communications? Mary Alice, would you take the chair, please?
I will take the chair, and the chair recognizes James.
Yes, I do want to share for both my colleagues and for the public. Unfortunately, I'm going through some medical situations that's going to require me to have surgery next week. And I've been told that I should plan for 4 weeks to recover from that. I will be participating in council meetings as I can remotely until I can be with us again, but it may be a couple of weeks, and I just wanted everyone to know that's where I was in case I'm not here. Thank you.
I relinquish the chair back to James.
All right, any other council communication? Sharice?
Yeah, I just want to state that I'm not against a housing project for those of us in the community that are more marginalized or have medical issues or anything like that. I'm looking at the history of how my community has been used for social engineering and benign neglect in some ways. And I wish that they could have just, this particular project could have found a different location that would have more amenities for the people that they say they want to serve, because they don't exist in my ward. And we are we already have a difficult time dealing with those services that are needed because they are not right there. Carl came up with this idea about the medical bus. This is something they could have been doing for the past 30 years that they've never done. And so they're talking about doing it now. And that's great. And the grocery thing, and that's great. But this is something, and not Carl, but I'm not just going to put it all on Carl, but this particular project is bringing those particular services now. I need permanent services. I don't need halfway services. And that's the consideration that I want everyone that works at the city to consider. Not just who's sitting here on the dais, but the staff. And it's something that I've been working toward for the past 4 years. And I want it known that just because they're moving something over into my area, that I'm not against it as much as I am against it's another, to me, it's another type of thing that happens within the mostly black neighborhoods all over the country. And I just want to see more services brought into my side of town where I know they need to be. And Hope Village might be a Band-Aid, but it is not a solution. What I want to say.
Thank you. Any other council comments? Seeing none, we have come to the end of our agenda, and so there was a discussion item, but there was nothing underneath it. I don't think anybody posed anything. We've come to the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned.